Don't stick to it or let it stick to you. It's only a sensation. You remain as you are, like that. So what is here now then? Is there a feeling of unhappiness? Is there?
Hello everyone, and welcome to Satsang. Although I'm trying to figure out some way to actually look at the questions, because I had to do this on my phone. So I'm seeing if I can connect up so I can actually see what the questions are. Otherwise, I might not be able to go ahead with this. So I see people are beginning to join, so glad to have you. Right at this moment, though, because I'm in the middle of nowhere, I think I tried to explain earlier that I have to be out of the house right now because it's being sold. My son is selling his house. In the last couple of days, I've just had to be nowhere. So I am trying to find a way in which I can both answer questions and be live simultaneously. So if you just bear with me, it was really difficult. Okay, I think I got that. Good. Retry. Alrighty. Now I go to my. Oh, there we are. And all right. Just turn down the volume so it doesn't get weirded out. Alrighty, there we are, Darsana. Hello, GP. Hello, Darsana. Good to see you. And Starlight Glimmer. Hello. Hello, everyone. All right. So this is going to be an unusual satsang because I'm going to be sitting here in my car. I was actually going to some really nice state parks. Right on the other side of the trees over there are mountains, and Mount Baker is right over there. However, how, however, all of the state parks are closed. I went to like 5 of them trying to find a place, and then I finally found this place it's not open, but it has parking, and it's basically an off-leash dog park. So here we are in the dog park, discussing the nature of reality. How's that for a nice Easter Sunday afternoon? Yeah. And the lighting makes my face look really red. Let me see what the so namaste from Ava. Hi Ava, John Watson. What a fantastic effort. Well, it's a beautiful drive. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous up here. I'm on Whidbey Island, the very north part of it. I didn't have enough time to get to Destination Pass. I actually took a ferry across. But it's a beautiful place. Very quiet, very nice. Let's see, what a fantastic ever. Oh, Jay says, where are you going to be staying, G? Ursa says, are you homeless then? Good to see you. I don't know yet, actually. I'm not sure if I'm going to stay, because I've been staying with my son. They're selling a place and moving someplace else. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. So I don't know. I have no idea at this moment. Yeah. So, I do every now and then get the wanderlust. As you know, before I stayed in New York for about a year, and then been at my son's for about a year, and before that I just kind of wandered. Didn't really have any place in particular to live. I haven't had a home of my own really since 2015. Yeah, since April, about May of 2015 I left Miami. So it's one of those things where I let life unfold itself. I think you all heard the story that this was 5 years ago. I was 63 years old. I got divorced. It was not a pretty divorce. It was very, very difficult. My business, I had a whole bunch of things that happened, and I quite literally lost everything. Lots of people say, "Oh, I lost everything." I really lost everything. I mean, I had a small 401k from a business which I turned over to my sons, which is a whole other complex thing. Not a problem with them. Some other things, um, and a little bit of money in my pocket, and I just kind of went off and went to India and Germany and around Bavaria and some other places. I was in London, I was in Canada, I was in Las Vegas, and then San Francisco, and then I was back in New York where I stayed for a bit. And now it's like, do I stay? I mean, I've grown attached to my granddaughter and she to me, but nonetheless, I'm sure it'll unfold. I've been pondering it. I keep waiting for somebody to need a house sitter in the south of France or or England or something, and I find myself in a very old stone place with a fireplace that has Wi-Fi, that has a good solid internet connection. That's kind of my dream. I'm holding on to that. That would be great. So let's see. So don't be worried, Ursula. I don't think I'm going to be going homeless anytime soon. Rosario, good to see you too. John Sheehan, John in Ireland. Namaste from Barbaro. Hi, Barbaro. Johnny B, wishing you all and listening the best. We list the best and all listening the best from Turnbridge Wells, Kent in England. David Elaine. Hi, GP and all. Greetings from South England. Commend your resolve to continue a satsang in the circumstances. Yeah. I guess it's commendable. I don't know. When you're in a circumstance, you just kind of do it, right? You just kind of make do. The Buddha was homeless, says Ursula. It's true. It's true. He just kind of wandered place to place. Yeah, it's true. Darsana has a question. I'll get back to that in a second, Darsana. Happy Easter from Mary Sykes, and happy Easter to all. Ralph says, lovely listening to you. Great to be here. Sean, Dale wants to see there's not much to see, actually. I suppose I could. It's mostly just forest around me. Unfortunately, the forest is blocking out the Cascade Mountains, which is right over there, and water, which is right over there. I tried for an hour and a half to get to a place where it had the beautiful mountains behind me and I could sit outside and do this. But as I mentioned before, all the state and national parks were closed. I couldn't get into any of them. So I'm actually at a off-leash dog walk park, right? That's in the middle of this forest. And there's an old, apparently maybe abandoned school bus in front of me. Let's see what else we got here. Well, Darsana, what does it mean to be egoless? What a great question. It's not what people think it is. Let me be really, really clear about that. To be egoless, a lot of people think you have no interests, you have no preferences, you have no desires, you have none of that. The truth is you have all of those things. They're just not personal. They're not like my desire, my preference. There's not this dogged holding on to things. The ego is a function of thought. It's just a thought, right? It is a particular pattern of thought that revolves around the sense of I. the sense of I am, right? Now, we all have the sense of I am, right? There's nobody here that does not have the sense of I am. Our actual name is I, right? All of us, none of us came with our names written on our forehead. We're all I. We all refer to ourselves as what? I. We all give ourselves exactly the same name. Now, what that I refers to is what's important. If that I is referring to a bunch of thoughts, a sense of being a separate self, a sense of being limited, finite, and mortal, um, then that is the ego. The ego is simply a sense of myself that's limited, constrained, and small, right? So what it means to be egoless means to feel limitless, expansive, totally self-accepting, not self-derogatory, accepting everything as it is. It's actually quite simple. It seems very, very complex, but it's only complex when initially in our spiritual journey, when we're still spiritually immature, we hear something like to be ego-free, and that becomes a quest to become ego-free. Well, that quest is the ego that's now trying to develop a spiritual ego, or as absurd as it sounds, an ego-free ego, right? The ego is nothing but a pattern of thoughts. It will be there probably for our whole lives, right? I mean, even people I know that are a fully enlightened being, there's there's a personal sense of self there. They simply do not, for 1 minute, mistake that for themselves. Remember, all patterns of thought, right, appear in front of consciousness. If that, which is you, right? I mean, we can talk about the ego, right? We can describe it, its attributes, its characteristics, its behaviors, all of it, which means it's not you. It is a subtle, but still quite discernible pattern of thought and emotion. And because it operates not just as thoughts, but as also emotions, and actually as sensations as well, there's a feeling that somehow there's a reality to it that it doesn't actually have. It feels as though there's actually something there. It's an entity. There's no entity there. The ego is a word to denote a sense of self. You know, originally the word ego came into the English language only about 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago. The word is actually the Latin word. Ego is simply the Latin word for I, and it came out of the translation that somebody did of the writings of Sigmund Freud, and he merely referred to it in German as Ich, as the I, right? So when you use that word, defining it psychologically as it was simply the word I. Well, when his translator translated it, for some reason, he decided to use the Latin word ego instead of using the English word I. And so ego became this psychological phenomena. All of a sudden, what is simply is my own sense of I, right? My limited sense of I became this beast, this entity, this thing that was like causing me all sorts of problems and doing some nasty things to me. Right? None of that's actually true. None of that was real. So to be in the egoless state is to simply see every thought in its origin. When a thought comes up, especially the thought of I, what's it referencing? Is it referencing a very limited sense of yourself? Like, I feel bad, I'm in trouble, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. That's the ego, right? Or I'm really great, right? Remember, ego just is not just the arrogance or conceit. It can be quite self-deprecating. Oh, I'm nothing, I'm useless, what's the point? All of that, right? So all of those thoughts that point back to a limited sense of self are the ego. All the thoughts that point back towards who you really are is the sense of being liberated from the ego. Right? The self, who you really are, does not need to be liberated from the ego. Right? It was never enslaved to the ego. Right? It was never the true being does not need to be liberated. The human sense of ourselves needs to be liberated from the false beliefs about who the human being, who we really are. And at the essence of that is this sense of being a personal, separate self, separate from the whole, little guy in the middle of this cold and dangerous universe trying to keep it together. That's all there is to the ego. To be ego free is to simply realize that's not who you are. Who are you? You're the consciousness that is aware of all these thoughts. And that is where you put the stake in the ground. Let's see here. Trying to, let's see. What else we got here? Digital nomad. There we go. The digital nomad. From Barbara. Liza, happy Sunday to you as well. Ivan, all from Bulgaria. Mobile Satsang? Mobile Satsang today, yes. Liz Love says, happy Easter, happy Satsang, happy to you, Liz Love. Great name. Let's see, Mary, GP, I love you very much. Love you too, Mary. Dave Scott, happy Easter. Happy Easter, Dave. Anjay asked, did you ever visit Germany? It's not South France, but we have a very nice place too. Actually, I did. I spent a little time down in Bavaria. Went down south of Munich through that whole, oh my God, just stunning, into Austria and Switzerland. Oh my goodness, so beautiful. Yeah, like I say, I keep waiting for somebody who needs somebody to live in their house for for a year somewhere totally wonderful and romantic and like that. Let's see. Janet, hi from Scotland. Hi to you. Starlight, would you believe it's possible to channel other people? Not really. You know, actors do that sort of thing all the time, right? Kind of get in, feel the vibe, the energy, the character of somebody, and can imitate them, can be very, I mean, often uncanny how it can work. You know, you hear people about channeling famous musicians and things like that. I think any of us has the capability of tuning into the energy signature of someone else. And oftentimes somebody has the ability then to actually just kind of let that energy speak through you as opposed to your own. But I wouldn't call it so much channeling. You know, the word channeling has gotten kind of taken over by, you know, the New Age crowd and turned into this mysterious kind of thing. So now we have all sorts of different channels of, you know, enlightened masters and ascended masters and these other interdimensional beings and the like. You know, that's one explanation of it. I think there's probably I don't know if there's no, sorry, I'm getting very distracted. Slow down. Problem is, on this screen where the camera is, things just, all sorts of messages keep flying up, so they keep grabbing my attention. So I just got to slow down here for a second. That term channeling has been kind of commandeered by New Age people to mean this kind of, there's this being who is speaking through you. Now, I've listened to channels, and oftentimes what they have to say is very valuable, and it appears as if it is coming from someplace other than the individual. There's no doubt that individual has gotten access to knowledge and insight and wisdom that they don't normally have. But I'm not ready to say that there's some other being out there speaking through them. There's really no evidence of that, and it can be explained in a number of different ways. The explanation isn't important. Is the information coming useful? And for me, useful means, does it enlighten one and alleviate suffering? If the answer is yes, then it's valuable information, and I don't really care where it comes from. Quite frankly, all information is channeled. You know, people say, "Oh, GP, you're channeling." You know, it's just kind of flowing through you. It's like, well, it happens to everybody. Have a conversation with a friend, and it just flows, doesn't it? Right? Would you call that channeling? You could. Why don't you? Well, because it happens so often that we don't call it that, right? It seems commonplace, so we don't give it any special mystical characteristics. But when you reach inside for an answer and the answer comes, the source of that answer is the essence of yourself. It isn't some being, some other. But if there is some other being speaking through you, where's the being getting that information from? Well, it's getting from the source, right? The one source of all wisdom, the one source of all knowledge, which is the true self. So if it's a 30,000-year-old ascended master like Ramtha, or it's Abraham, the Abraham continuum, or it's Seth. There's a whole bunch of different ones. Okay, they put a personality on something, but if there was a person there, they would simply be saying what's coming to them, no different than you would. So the ultimate source for all of us, for all things, is exactly the same. And you don't have to go through an intercessor or an intermediary to get access to that wisdom, any more than you have to go to a priest to get access to God. It's direct. So, do I believe in channeling other beings? No. Do I believe that that wisdom flows through us from the source that is within us? Yes. It happens all the time. It's happening right now. It's happening in the question that flowed out of you, right? So, I don't want to sound like it's just nothing but debunking, right? Because it's not that. It's the experience people have of an influx of information they normally wouldn't have is real. Our explanations of it are immature. That's the best way to put it. Hi G, hi Sean. Johnny B, how should you deal with people who have big egos and opinions and difficult personalities? Should you just be quiet around them or try to engage? Well, like anything difficult in your life, it is. Oh, I got a couple of people who've donated. Thank you very much. Wow. I guess I should make the homeless pitch more often. I should get a little cup for Satsang. That'd be really good. Anyway, we can't approach life with a strategy and a bunch of plans. Okay? We can't do that. it doesn't make any sense because life is unpredictable. Especially, we can't have a strategy for how to deal with difficult people because we don't know what they're going to do, right? You know, if you find yourself with difficult people, get away. There's nothing saying you have to be there, have to engage with them. If you can't get away from it, well, then you use it as an opportunity to simply allow things to be the way they are and keep your attention focused on your own inner being. You know, sometimes people will try to goad you into interacting with them. You know, some people they like the conflict, they like the fight, they like having an argument, right? And if they can't get you into an argument, there were several people that approached Buddha like that and got really frustrated because he simply wouldn't argue. It's like, yeah, okay. Oh, okay, you feel that way. That's great. How do you feel? Yeah, it's not important. Right? It's not important to me. It's not important. Why isn't it important? I don't know. Anything, right? You can't prepare in advance for how people are going to act or treat you, as the like. You know, there's well-behaved egos and there's arrogant, difficult to be with egos. As I said, usually if you're just quiet, don't make a big deal out of it, an exit will open and you can just remove yourself. You don't have to be there. If you get forced into an engagement, which is very, very unlikely, but if it should happen, just accept it and move on. Just be okay, and just keep your attention focused inside. The thing that'll hook you is not their opinions, but your judgment and reaction to their arrogance. And our reaction to someone's arrogance is our own arrogance. Always. People who have truly conquered their egos, maybe not completely removed it, but conquered it, which means be totally aware of it, right? Are not offended by a big ego. So if there's any offense left in you or judgment that these people shouldn't be that way, that's the hidden ego inside of you that needs to be eradicated. Because you can always tell the ego because it's always positioning itself in relationship to someone else. They're arrogant and I'm not, therefore I'm better, right? Or I'm worse than them. God, they're so smart, I'm so dumb. The ego is forever comparing itself with others to define itself, either as better or as worse. Remember, the ego doesn't care whether it's better or worse. Right? That it's not interested in as long as it has a position, as long as it can say, I am this. That's what it wants. That's the sense of stability, because the self doesn't have such a position. The self is neither better nor worse. It is completely and totally neutral. The sun shines equally on the just and the unjust, on the humble and on the arrogant. So be the sun that just shines. And see if you can find in your hearts love. And you don't have to look at it. Turn on the news. You know, see any of the so many people with these horrifically horrible divisive opinions. And, you know, look at our people in government. Arrogance coming every which way out of them. Just look at them for a little bit and then watch inside yourself. It's a great place to practice allowing them to be the way they are, because they are simply acting out their conditioning ignorantly the same way the rest of us have. Just, you know, they didn't get on a spiritual path to become humble. They began on a path to become powerful and arrogant. But the conditioning is the form the conditioning takes is the same. The is very different, but it's all conditioning, which means it's not you. It's not really you. And that's the most important thing to note. I got to go back here and take the folks who have. Oh no! Oh dear! Where are they? Oh, there we go. Jay said, "If I were in your situation, I'd probably be panicking and stressed out so much. I hope you could resolve this soon." Um, Gosh, I can't remember the last time I panicked or freaked out. Things just have a way of working out, you know? Sometimes it looks like it's going to get a little close, right? But, it's not like I'm homeless, right? I'm not going to be on the street, I have 2 sons. We have great relationships. It's just a matter of where do I want to be? I'm not being thrown out, right? Right? It's just another transition period is coming, and I'm deciding exactly which way I want to go. So I thank you all for your concern. It's so sweet. John. Oh, John just donated. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Let's go back here. Let's see. Then what is the so-called id? I don't really understand the whole ego, superego, and id. They're words that that came up. There was a time, way long time ago, I had studied a little psychology in school or something, and I knew what they meant. But at this point, I really have no idea. They correspond to different aspects of the psyche. The just the drives, the animal drives, as opposed to the egoic drive, as opposed to the superego, which is supposed to be our conscience and all of that. It's a very psychological, cold, actually, a very cold, mechanical way of breaking down a human being, which is why I don't give much credence to it. So I wouldn't worry about it. Jorge says, the ego, the feeling that I am a person, is a delusion, isn't it? There is a body, but there's not a person inside my body, isn't it? Yes, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, the ego isn't a real thing. The ego the delusion is that I actually am this body, these limitations, these thoughts, and these emotions. That's the sum total of the ego, and that's an illusion. It's not true. You're not that. There is no actual entity in the body. And consciousness is not in the body. The body is in consciousness. It's simply the way consciousness is perceiving that gives the illusion that there is that somehow consciousness has been compressed within the skull. It hasn't. It's only the means by which things are being perceived. So if you actually dig down into it, you discover by direct observation that all of the senses that we are experiencing are actually appearing within consciousness. We have this idea that I'm here and the object that I'm seeing over there, that I stop here and that then there's some distance and the object appears over there. But yet the entire experience is happening within consciousness. So the distance between here and there is an illusion that has been projected on the experience of consciousness. It happens every night in our dreams. You have a dream, you're standing there talking to somebody, right? Well, there's nobody there. It's all you, and they're not over there, are they? It's simply the way we perceive things. And so the way we perceive things makes it appear as if we're in this 3D world, when in fact we are walking within consciousness, and everything is happening here and now. You're never out of here and now. There's nothing other than here and now. Are you following that? So yes, there's no being in the body. There's a sense that there is, but that sense is simply a residue of when all of us got caught by the belief that I am my body, and therefore began to feel ourselves limited by the body, compressed within the body, and we feel like we are someone in the body. That belief gets laid into us so strongly, conditioned into us so strongly, that the whole mechanism of the nervous system, which is also just consciousness functioning, operates as if there were an actual entity in the body, right? So all the thoughts, all the emotions, and all the sensations revolve around this essential assumption that there's an entity here inside the body. There isn't. There's nothing here. There's no one here. That is, there's no entity in the body. There is someone here. It's you. But you are consciousness. When you use the word I am, that is consciousness. The body is not sentient. It can't talk, it can't think, it can't act, it can't do anything. It is completely a vehicle animated by and informed by consciousness. Consciousness is the only experience we ever actually have. And that's easy to simply look for yourself and see. Right? It's the only experience you've ever had. You can't have an experience outside of consciousness, by definition, right? It doesn't exist. Right? And we can speculate, does it exist or not exist? But for all intents and purposes, as far as your life is concerned, it doesn't exist. The only experience you have is consciousness, which is why I keep emphasizing for us to be paying attention to our direct experience of being consciously aware, and set aside all the ideas of where consciousness came from and how it works, and the entire material model of the universe, set it aside because it's an unverifiable postulate. It's a hypothesis that is completely unprovable. So instead, let's focus on what we do know. I am self-aware being. From there, I can stick a stake in the ground. Yes, this is absolutely the case. The one thing I know for sure is that I am, and that I'm aware that I am. Everything else is questionable. That is not. So if I start from there, everything I experience begins to appear within my own I amness. And the boundaries between self and other become thinner and thinner until they finally just poof and dissolve. Thank you for that question, Johnny B. Oh no, was that Johnny B? No, Jorge. Jorge, thank you, Jorge. White Widow, who is the experiencer? The experiencer is always consciousness. Now, just validate that for yourself, right? Without consciousness, what experience could there possibly be, right? There can't be any, right? Take away consciousness, what do you have? You don't exist without consciousness. So the ultimate experiencer is, of course, you, consciousness. Conscious awareness. You, conscious awareness, one and the same. You can't possibly separate the two, right? You can't have a you without consciousness. It'd be a rock, right? And you can't have consciousness without being, right? Being and consciousness are two aspects of one ineffable thing. So, I have no idea what the guy in Jorge, you're writing in Portuguese. I have no idea what you're saying. I hope it's nice. I hope it's nice. So, White Widow, who is the experiencer? The experiencer is not a person. That's the thing we think. Oh, I'm the experiencer. right? And then we think that that experience is me personally. But the me you're referring to is something that you actually experience. The thoughts that make up this me, the emotions that make up this me, the memories, the associations, the behavior, the conditioning, all of this that makes up what I'm calling me is all being experienced. Right? The ultimate experiencer cannot be experienced. It's not an object that it can perceive. The ultimate perceiver cannot perceive itself. In order for perception to happen, there must be a subject-object relationship. I have to be able to stand aloof from what I'm perceiving and say, there it is. So by definition, if I can perceive it, it's not me. Which means myself, the ultimate absolute perceiver, cannot be perceived. I cannot know myself the way I know anything else. I cannot know myself as an object. So how do you know yourself? There's any thought you have about yourself is perceived, so it's not you. And any thought is about something that is perceived. You being imperceivable, no thought can possibly describe you. No emotion can capture you. No sensation can touch you. The imperceivable cannot be described. So the entirety of human knowledge can be set aside. Nothing known about you can possibly be true. And so the self-knowledge that is referred to, jnana knowledge in Sanskrit, the transcendent knowledge, the Vedanta knowledge beyond knowledge, is not the knowledge of subject-object. It is self non-dual realization. It is what Muji calls non-phenomenal recognition. When I ask you, do you exist? The answer comes back, yes. Right? Sure. Right? Now, when I ask you, do you exist, and you answered yes, in between, you referred to something. Right? What was that you referred to? It wasn't an object, it wasn't a thing, you didn't look at your hands. Something intuitive, you just know. That knowing is not subject-object, it is non-phenomenal. That knowing and your being are one. So the experiencer is not an object, it's not a person, it's not a thing. You could actually just refer it as experiencing itself, or just pure knowing, or pure being, but not as an actual object of any kind. Does that answer it for you, White Widow? Jeff, hey Jeff, good to see you. Hi GP. Is egoless state the inward version of losing everything? Everything that can be lost. Yes. Can't say everything, right? Everything that can be lost. And you know, about 4 or 5 times a week now, I've been doing those meditations at my morning. And in every single one of them, what do? We drop the past, we drop the future, we drop the present, we drop waiting for what's next. We just drop everything that can possibly be dropped. But what remains? What remains is the pure you. The pure you without anything extra added. That is the egoless state. Now, the egoless state can be aware of the operating of ego. Did you follow that? This is really important. The egoless state doesn't mean there's no egoic thoughts happening. All it means is that you are aware of yourself as that which is witnessing all things. Therefore, and discerning the nature of those things. Therefore, when an egoic thought pops up, you witness it, right? If you don't say that thought, I'm really not enough, right? And you just simply recognize that it is just a thought that says I am not enough, and it's not actually me, you are still in the egoless state, recognizing the egoic mind in action. So don't think it means that there's no more thoughts. It's what it means is that you have correctly discerned those thoughts, and there's no identification with them any longer. You see the difference? That's what it means to truly lose everything. That's also what it means in spiritual practice, in some spiritual practices, the renunciation of the world. That's what it means. I am renouncing everything that is not me. I am literally laying everything on the table, including everything I have known as myself. So you simply let go, and you find that there's not even a you that it can let go. That even the letting go has not been the ego. That it's the self that has simply let go, which is a hard thing to understand. Well, it never really held on to the first place. Don't worry about all that. Just kind of take it where it is. Wildcat drums. So we are all the same one being, consciousness experiencing itself in infinite number of appearances. We call Dale or GP, etc. So ultimately, we are literally God looking at itself through everything. Yes. But now I want you to deepen that so that it's not just an idea, right? Now, it's a good idea, and you are absolutely in the right place. You are right on it. Now, you need to let that internalize so it becomes experiential knowledge, and not just, there's an insight at this point. This insight needs to sink even more deeply in, so that you become aware in your bones, right? That this is all being. All being is actually one. And the way to do that is to withdraw back into the place where there's nothing left but the pure experience of yourself. And then little by little, that sense of self, having an experience, begins to fall away. And what's left is the pure, shining resplendency of the I am that is completely unidentified with anything. And that I am is the same in me as it is in you. There's not two of them. There is no other to this I am. There's not I am and you are. There's only I am. And when you get into that deep meditation, what's the sense? It's just the sense of I am. That's it. We have to step out and look externally to another world to think of an I am and a you are. And we have to make a boundary between this I am and that I am. But the only experience you ever have, the only experience anyone ever has, is that of I am. Now just keep clearing everything away until there's nothing left but that I am. Believe me, it won't leave you sitting in a corner, drooling on yourself, or sitting somewhere chanting Om all day. You'll actually become more active, you'll become more resourceful, you'll become more kind, you'll become more interesting, you'll become, your human life will actually begin to flow with the grandeur of life itself. It won't be near it. A lot of people are like, well, if I'm just this state of pure consciousness, then nothing's going to happen. No, it's all just pure consciousness. The sense of I am, these trees around me have a sense of I am. It's not the same as our human. They can't articulate it in a thought. Every sentient being knows I am. Do they not? A mosquito knows I am. How do they know? They're not thinking about it. They don't have a checklist, because that same shared being, animates all forms. So that's the God. God, I am, right? I am is a name for God. And the religious name they give it, they call it God. People then take that God and turn it into the ultimate object, not realizing what it's referring to is that sense I am within every single being that there is. The, the blade of grass has the sense I am. Everything does. It permeates everything. It is immanent in everything. Jess M. Hi from Montgomery. Hi, Jess. John Sheehan. Is ego equals conditioning equals person? Close. No cigar. Conditioning is a natural product, right? It's a natural function. It happens. Everything that you experience is conditioning, right? The phone that I'm doing this on is conditioned energy, isn't it? It's energy put into a particular form. Energy, of course, can be anything, right? It can take any form. It happens to have been conditioned in this form. You're looking at it on a computer, you're looking at it on a phone. The car I'm sitting in, this body, is all conditioned. Well, in animate life, like animals and mostly animals and the like, that conditioning is more subtle and complex, so that our emotions are conditioned. Our thinking is conditioned. Right? Animals, of course, don't really think the way we do. But so thought, all of this is conditioned energy. In and of itself, it's not a problem. All right? If you know that it is conditioned, right? You recognize it as conditioned. You know, the energy, which can be anything, can take any shape, got put in the particular container, like water being put into a jar. That jar happened to be your family, your tribe, right? And so certain things were allowed, certain things weren't. So the nervous system conditioned itself into a particular form, right? Perfectly natural. Now notice, a dog, you can condition a dog, right? You know, throw the stick, it'll fetch, bark, beg, all of that kind of stuff. They don't have any issue about it, right? They don't feel, put upon. They don't think, God, I have to do this again. Going to therapy and that, they don't do that. They don't have that kind of capacity. They don't have an issue. Conditioning does not have an issue in and of itself. Something higher has to arise in order to look at conditioning and go, you know what? I don't like that. So there's this energy that desires freedom as well. Now, what happens is, in the human being, a sense of identity arises. That sense of identity that arises needs to identify itself with something. It can't deal with just with emptiness. It's not ready to do that yet. With just the formlessness, or that I can be anything, which means I'm nothing in particular. And what does it do? It identifies with the body, the conditioning. When that identification takes place, that is the origination of the ego. The conditioning itself is just conditioning. It doesn't have any problems, doesn't any issue, it's just conditioning. The tree's the tree, the dog's the dogs, the human's the human. No big deal. It is this other element, right, that will ultimately lead to freedom, that identifies with the body, identifies with the form, identifies with conditioning, and that sense of I is the egoic mind, and that's the person. The person, the ego, really, they're synonymous. They're two different ways of saying exactly the same thing. And so you can see how it emerges. Even after awakening, there's an awareness of conditioning. Conditioning is still there, right? This is still, this body, I know I'm not this body, right? But this body still acts in certain ways, came from a certain place that, it looks Irish, right? And it's got these kinds of characteristics, it still has certain ways of doing things. I was listening to Eckhart Tolle and his partner, Kim Lang, I can't remember her last name now. talking about, and Eckert was talking about things that he does that are just, they're really classically Germanic, right? When you're aware of them, it's innocent. It's just, oh, that's a very Irish thing to do, right? It's a very English thing to do. It's a very German thing to do, whatever, right? They're not a problem. They're actually they can be very endearing, right? Charming little idiosyncrasies. Once you realize that they're just conditioning, this just happens to be the form that this particular vehicle took, that is the instrument of the expression of me, which was never conditioned in the first place. The unconditioned pure energy that is shining through this particular form, right? I take a piece of brass, I can turn it into a trumpet, or I can turn it into a saxophone. Is it a problem? Does a saxophone have an issue with that? No, they're two different modes, the same energy, two different modes that have just a very different mode of expression, right? The same song played on both would sound very, very different, or get the piano. So are Kim Eng, right? Thank you, Jay. So you're following what I'm saying, right? There's nothing wrong with the conditioning. It is simply the shape that the instrument happens to be in, right? um, so, uh, so once you identify with that, right? I am my car, right? You're stuck, right? Suddenly now I am that. I am contained in it. If it's just there and I'm not that, I move in it, I move out of it, I move into it, I move out of it. I can play this piano, I can play that piano, or I can play this flute, or I can play that drum, right? I'm no longer stuck anywhere. That's the problem with the ego, the sense of person, is it gets stuck. There's nothing wrong with the form. Matter of fact, when you transcend the person, the form is actually limited. That sense of a person actually constrains your human life as well. So I hope that answers it for you, John. Great question. Thank you. See, I got that one from Jay. Mary Sykes. There's a small apartment next door to me, GP. It's empty. Don't know if it's for rent. Find out if you're interested. No, not heading back to New York. Been to New York twice. Lived in Manhattan for 9 years. Then I lived over in Queens for another year and a half. So no, done with that part of the cold too. So thank you though. October Paul. Hey GP, how do I give myself for calling out a friend for something he did 9 years ago? He's really mad at me now. Well, you could start with the most practical thing, which is you could apologize, right? Oops, right? Let's take a minute though and examine what was it about. What was it that made you hold on to it for 9 years? Was it a really huge offense? I mean, I've had some people do some nasty stuff to me, you know. Every now and then just kind of pops up, right? There's a little part that a little part of the ego that simply wants to hold on to it. And of course, if I didn't catch it, it would hold on to it, right? so the spiritual path is a path of vigilance and watchfulness, right? So taking a long look at it, look at something was hurt in you. He abandoned his kids for a few years. I see. Well, yes. As a father who took care of kids, who was a single father for a lot of that time, the idea of abandoning your kids is inconceivable to me. But then I have to look at my desire to judge somebody else. The Native Americans say, before you judge a man, walk a mile in his moccasins. That kind of got taken over by the English, walking a mile in another person's shoes. We have no idea what somebody else has gone through, the conditioning, the internal pressure, I look back at my own life, some of the things that I did, and I realized so many things converged that now I never would have thought about doing it. But at the time, you know, there are some dads that really are deadbeats. They really don't have a heart and they don't love, but most do. And they just feel so estranged. They feel so weak. They feel like they've been so, they can't do a good job. They're embarrassed of themselves. They're ashamed of themselves. And they're running away to hide as much as they are to get away from responsibility. It's actually more to hide than the responsibility. I would be very, very, very open to, even talk to him. I was really hard on you. What was it like for you? What was it that made you feel like you had to abandon your kids? Did you not love them? I won't judge you if you didn't. Some people can't love, right? My mother couldn't love, right? I knew it. That's rare, right? Just, become willing to hear him if he's willing to talk. If he's not, well, there's nothing you can do. At that point, you simply have to deal with your own judgment, deal with the consequences of your action, feel the remorse of that, because that's how we become wise and intelligent, is when we actually feel the impact we have on others. That's called empathy. That's called the capacity to experience another's feelings. And believe me, if the leaders of our world and captains of industry and people making war all over the place could actually feel the impact in their hearts of what they're doing, it would stop. But they can't. That's the problem, right? They have no empathy. They have become so isolated and so cut off that it's all just numbers on a chart. So become empathetic. What happened to someone who, let's assume that he had kids, he wanted to take care of them. What happened that made him feel as if he had to run away and not do that? And how is he feeling? What guilt has he been carrying for the last 9 years that you might be able to alleviate for him, right? So that's a very open, compassionate, heartfelt way to do it. And believe me, when we're doing things open and heartfelt and compassionate, that is non-dual. Non-dual is not some abstraction. Well, there's nobody who ever did anything and nobody's at fault and it was all his conditioning and there was nobody there. That is a very piss-ass way out to me. It's like compassion. This is a time for taking the opportunity to have your heart broken open, and open so wide that it can receive him, and so wide that you can receive him even if he can't receive you. Even if he pushes you away and never talks to you again, that you open up to the point where there's no animosity left in you. There's no judgment whatsoever for him or for you, right? Because look, whenever an untoward circumstance happens, it's two robots interacting, always. It is this conditioning and this conditioning interacting. If consciousness is there, this doesn't happen because there's receptivity, right? When there's conditioning and attachment to the conditioning, which is ego, conflict takes place. Period. End of story. So the way to self-forgiveness is to recognize that you weren't conscious. You were being the robot. Boom. Simple as that. You were stuck yourself in the same kind of place that he was that made him do what he did. This is, boy, when we realize that we're all in the same boat here, we are all bozos on this bus, everything gets a whole lot easier. Violet Crumble. Interesting name. Hi, GP. I'm an American stranded in Australia, wondering if I will ever get home. Of course, Australia is a beautiful country to be stranded in. A blessing to you. Indeed it is. Yeah, I could think of worse places to be stranded. Is this a hardship for you? You just missing home? Is it difficult? Is it a financial struggle? Are you alone? Um, uh, yeah, these are very. You know, folks, we live in unprecedented times. As I've said before, we're experiencing an epoch, the end of the Kali Yuga. Right? This period of time has been predicted by many, 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 many very awakened beings over time through very many, many different cultures. This is not a temporary bump in the road towards, eternal material progress. This is a major chasm, and this is one instance of it. This is not it, right? Believe me, this is one of many upheavals that are coming, that are going to shift us out of our somnambulism and wake our sorry asses up. So the tendency for all of us, and it's natural and it's unavoidable, we have to become conscious of it, is a deep desire to return to the way things were. The way things were are gone, right? Yes, there'll be a respite. This quarantine will end. Things will get back to quote unquote normal. But under the surface, well, partially under the surface, partially on the surface, are some changes so fundamental that they're going to be having a continued impact for many, many years to come. More and more waves of this. And we're going to see some of them on the surface immediately. It's terrible to say, but there's many small businesses that are not going to recover. They're not going to come back. Hopefully, new ones will come up and take their place, and we won't be completely taken over by large interests. But it could get that far. There will be power grabs, right? Because it is completely unstable, right? We don't really have governments anymore. We have corporations and their lackeys, right? And we have a bunch of people who are trying to divide up the world amongst themselves. They can't, of course, because they're not conscious, right? Let's not forget that the three poisons that Buddha laid out were ignorance, delusion, and greed. Greed is one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. It is one of the seven deadly sins. It is complete ignorance, and the remedy for it is not really civil war or anything like that. It is for us to wake up. It is to be conscious, because it is unconscious, right? So these circumstances that we find ourselves in are simply saying, look, let go of the way things were. Let go of what you thought things were supposed to be, of the way you thought they were supposed to go. Let go of your dreams, right? That doesn't mean we should it's not a resignation. It means let go of the dreams were simply materialistic. I want to have this money and this car and this vacation and this perfect, all of that. Let go of the materialistic ambitions and take the invitation to go further and further and further in. Yep, things are different, and they're not going to be the same. I feel inside me the natural desire of my energy system to want to return to the way things were. If it really dawns on me that I can't go back to the way things were, I will feel grief. Also natural, also necessary, and also inevitable. So then you just let yourself feel the grief of letting go of what can't happen anymore, letting go of that which is gone for good. And then what happens? The entire energy system begins to reform itself around a new center. Let's make that center be conscious awareness. And that will create a new world. Because remember, it is the level of consciousness of humanity that has created the world that we're in. And so the beckoning is always for the creation, a new consciousness that will inevitably create a new world. But that new consciousness is not something imposed from the outside. It's something enticed, seduced from the inside. And it happens in individuals. It will extend itself to groups, but it always starts with individuals and expands outward. I'm suddenly being joined in the dog walk by all the dogs. There's actually a crowd of these lovely dogs out and people walking them. It's pretty beautiful. So I hope that's helpful to you, Violet Crumble. Mary Sykes says, Esther Hicks is only speaking from her higher self. It's true, and it's interesting. She used to talk about Abraham. I've listened to her occasionally, and she used to speak of Abraham as this other dimensional being and the like, and she's actually started talking the last couple of years from the point of view of it being her higher self. So Esther too is maturing. Although I did hear one question to Abraham once, I'm glad I heard it, about somebody talking about non-duality. Now he clearly didn't have a deep understanding of non-duality, but something about him had clearly resonated, and he asked Abraham about it. Abraham didn't have a clue. It had to define it in terms of desire, which is the whole model of that. It was really quite interesting. But remember when Siddhartha had his enlightenment and became the Buddha, the awakened one. According to the legend, beings from all dimensions came to hear the Dharma. Heaven beings, hell beings, hungry ghosts, divas, demigods, everything came to this one place to hear the Dharma. So any being, even if there are some beings out there, angelic beings or an Abraham, that still see themselves as some kind of individualized form, is still under the illusion. Even if they're in a heavenly space where they just think something and it manifests, if there's still a sense of there being a personal me, however rarefied that might be, they're still in illusion. They're still in the dream. It's a better dream than this one, but they're still in the dream. And according to Buddha, that those places are much harder than here in order to come to awakening. That to be born as a human is the most auspicious and blessed thing that could ever happen to you, because it is here there's the perfect mixture between all the opposites that the ultimate awakening can take place. This is the cross, the utter center between heaven and earth, between heaven and hell, between the past and the future. This is the cross, right, upon which the ego is crucified. Right? So there you have that. Starlight Glimmer says, yeah, thanks. That's how I was feeling about channeling. Course in Miracles claims to be from Jesus, and the teaching in it seems good from what I've read, even if it wasn't literally from him. Yes, agreed. They caught the spirit of Jesus, right? Which is the Holy Spirit. People, that happens in Pentecostal church stuff. I've met people. I've actually been at events where people were receiving the Holy Spirit. I knew some people a long time ago. I talked to them about it. They had an enlightenment experience, but they were very quickly absorbed into a theology and an ideology that had no context for an enlightenment experience. And therefore, it got completely compressed into this horrible fundamentalist thing. But the actual experience they had was awakening. Well, the same thing happened to me at 19. I had no context. I'd never heard of enlightenment. I had no idea what had happened. But this extraordinary event took place. And in my search for it, I went through metaphysics and different kinds of things. It was much later that I ran across my first non-dual writings in Zen, and I was like, oh my God, there it is, there it is. Finally, I'm searching. There are all these places, and there's hints, and it's a little of this, and then finally there it is. It is said right out loud. There's some other guy now who claims to be channeling. A couple of people claiming to be channeling Jesus. And yes, the Course of Miracles, there's a lot of really, really good stuff in it. But remember as long as there's a channel, the channel is going still through a personality, so it's going to be colored. And so there are some things in the Course of Miracles and some other writings from before that period of time, Mary Baker Eddy and Ernest Holmes and the whole New Thought folks, that were so spot on and then off to the side. Now, I didn't know it at the time, right? But now I do, because when I've looked at the pure stuff just completely laid out there, I realized that these were all deep, pure teachings, but were received within a context and in a culture that simply did not know how to handle it. So they got colored, right? Moses' enlightenment got colored into the Ten Commandments, and from that, I don't know how many thousands of laws they had after that. It went from an awakening, which it clearly was, into a bunch of laws, right? And so I've seen that happen. These deeply awakened experiences, very enlightened, and then it gets compressed simply because they didn't know any better, right? They didn't have any context. Those same people that happened in India, right? It's been like, oh, no brainer. Everybody known exactly what to do with them, right? Off to the temple. They know exactly. The sage take them. They would be trained. Oh, I'm missing my family. Right. I just saw that one from Violet Crumble. Ah, my dear friend. Yes. I totally get it. I totally get it. Is it like your family, like parents and the like, or is it like husband and children? I mean, either way, it's hard. But obviously, if you're separated from your husband and children, it could be. Will be reunited. It's not right, and it's not going to be much longer. So don't be concerned about that. But once again, even in these deep feelings of deprivation, see if you can find the peace of that inner stillness of the peace. Remember that no matter how much the upset, no matter how much emotional pain we might be feeling, there is a dimension in you that is beyond it. Doesn't diminish it, doesn't dismiss it, isn't reframing it or pushing it out. It's completely and totally accepting it. It is so openly and welcoming and embracing of it that it frees you from the suffering. It'll be there. That yearning for the ones you love will be there, but it won't. But there'll be a different dimension to it. As harsh as a time like this could seem to you, really try to make use of it as an opportunity to come more deeply into yourself, into that which you can never be separated from, which is your own true being. That's really where we take refuge. Ann Kaufman came on late. You're no longer living with your son. No. My son is just selling the house. The last 2 days, there has been, everybody's out. They're out doing their thing. I'm out doing my thing. And they are moving. So I am considering going somewhere else. I'm not sure where yet. It's just one of those times when I think it may be time to move on. Far away, not far away. Not quite sure. So anyway, so all is well. I'm not homeless. I'm good. Jorge, oops. Sorry, my friend. Don't speak. I don't read Portuguese. Is there an experiencer and a doer, or just an experiencer? Asks Amir. There's a doing. There's no doer. Obviously, there's doing, right? But where's the doer, right? My hair grows. Can you find the hair grower? My food digests. Is there a doer of that? Is a digester there somewhere? We project a personage onto that which is simply life functioning. Thought is simply life functioning, right? There's no thinker. You can't find a thinker ever. And even your sense of identity is just a thought that nobody is thinking, right? Now, the only reason this becomes cluttered is because consciousness. All of this happens within consciousness. Without consciousness, there'd be no thinking, right? It requires the environment of consciousness in order to exist, in order to come out and come up and arise and, dance, do its thing. But the thought of I isn't pointing to a real I. Consciousness, which is real, which is you, the reality, and you are real, nobody has to prove that to you. You do exist, right? Has simply identified with this thought I and then imagined yourself to be the doer, imagined yourself to be the thinker, right? So now I'm the thinker of thoughts, I'm the doer of deeds, and in fact, there is thinking going on. That is, thoughts are appearing in succession. There are things happening, but there's no doer to those things. And you are not a doer or a thinker. You are the ultimate experiencer, in front of which all thinking is occurring. Right? There's nothing wrong with thinking. It's the part of the natural flow of life. It's the natural flow of human life, unique to human life. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, as long as you do not mistake yourself for the thinker. Simple as that. So there isn't a doer or a thinker. And don't personalize the experiencer. The experiencer is not a thing. It's more like just this field of awareness that is simply self-aware. Self-aware because that's all there is for it to be aware of. It's the only thing that actually is. Everything else is an appearance, right? Not an entity. The only entity, the only thing that actually is the consciousness in which everything is appearing. Everything else is an appearance of it, a modulation, a vibration, whatever you want to call it. The dynamic consciousness is like space or like energy in that it can take innumerable forms. That's the dynamic aspect, right? The essential aspect is absolutely still and formless. It is simply being itself, not being as anything, simply being. It simply is, right? It is not this or that. It simply is. Sean the Humble. Hi, G. So our whole experience and everything we see is within us. So where to put attention? Very good question. In order for this to become more than just first an intellectual curiosity, then a spiritual conviction, in order for it to become a lived experience, right, we have to put our attention on that which is. As I was just saying, consciousness, conscious awareness is the self. Right? That your sense of being is the self. That's you, pure, unmixed with anything else. It is formless, it is timeless, it cannot be seen, it cannot be described, it cannot be known. It cannot, because there's no knowledge of it, because there's nothing, there's no thing there to be known. It cannot be known, subject-object relationship. So all knowledge about it is irrelevant. There is no knowledge about it. The ultimate knowledge is simply the sense I am. That's where you put your attention until the sense of I, which is now mixed up. You know, I'm this person, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm old, I'm young, I'm this, I'm that. All these characteristics that we normally have I associated with. When I is removed from all of those characteristics, they're still there. There's just no identification with them. That sense of I, which is the dynamic aspect of the absolute consciousness, comes back home to rest in the isness, the pure beingness. And that is the full awakening. That is the fully awakened sage. It is the process of the I returning back home. And so when your attention is going back to that sense, you are noticing how the sense of I, that sense of identification, wants to attach to forms. The very fact that you can see that is a key, that is an indicator of spiritual progress. And now you just keep bringing it back here. Now the mind will say, well, what's going to happen to all this stuff? Nothing, really. It'll be fine, right? All of the dynamic stuff will be there without the burden of a sense of I, which is the ego or the person. The sense of I will be resting at home. And therefore, the entire manifest universe will now be felt as myself, rather than just a spiritual belief or even a spiritual conviction. It goes even deeper, right? To the point where this is, I am all, right? As you're withdrawing, you first go into this place of I am nothing. I am not a thing. Nothing defines me, spaceless, timeless. No knowledge can define me. I have no attributes, no characteristics. When that journey is complete, the door spins open the other way. And now the entire universe comes in as myself. This is the twofold path, at least the way I do it. So, hope that answers it for you, Sean the Humble. Pate, hi G, I'm wondering, is meditation something that actually has the potential to help towards realization? Yes, if it's done correctly. If it's done correctly. If it's not done correctly, no. If it's done with an object, and oftentimes, especially in the West, when meditation came over to the West, like yoga, it really got diluted. And so it becomes about stress relief. It's all about return on investment. You know, you hear companies going, we're going to implement in our wellness program, we're going to have meditation classes. And their thinking is, well, return on investment, right? It's going to make our employees more productive. They're not thinking about self-realization, right? So when meditation is done correctly, it is a withdrawing of attention away from the past, the future, the present, all ideas as to who you think you are. It is the process by which our attention removes itself from all the places in which the sense of I, the sense of identity, has mixed itself up, limited it, made it finite, temporary, bound by time, right? That sense of I moving back towards that silent, perfect center, that's true meditation. And of course, that is the path to self-realization. That and inquiry. Those are the two paths. The meditation is simply bringing the sense of being back to that space. Right? And then something like an inquiry would be, like I did earlier with someone else. can the perceiver be perceived? Can the one who's actually witnessing all of this witness itself? That's not a meditation, that's an inquiry, right? And so those are the two different ways of approaching realization. I do both. I need both. Most people need to have both. And even those who are on a devoted path, that really are just devoted to God, completely surrendering to God, eventually have to come to distinguish what it is, what's the difference between this self that is devoted and the God to which it's devoted. And then a level of inquiry gets introduced even there. So does that answer it for you, Pete? Yeah, Pete. Looking at two different places here to get the question. Sean says, "I'm not conceivable or perceivable. All is illusion." I believe that's exactly what Nisargadatta said. What are you? Nothing conceivable or perceivable. You can't think about yourself, and you cannot perceive yourself. Now that shouldn't seem so weird, right? Your eye can't see itself. A finger can't touch itself, right? A knife can't cut itself. Why? Because it's one. You cannot know yourself as subject to object. That knowing is Vedanta, which means the end of knowledge. It is transcendent knowledge. It is being as knowledge. You know because you are. And the knowing that you are is the knowing. And that's not a person. It's not a form. It's not bound by anything. It is just pure being. You just are, not as anything. That statement just by itself is something that you could ponder, right? Just being, but not as something. Because the mind always, being makes a form, a person, something. But no, just being without a form. I just am. That's a powerful meditation in and of itself, and in inquiry together. Is wholeness the fruit of enlightenment? Enlightenment is the realization of wholeness. It is not gained by enlightenment. Enlightenment is not something and then you get the goodies, right? The boons, right? The reward. Oh, I won, yay. It's wholeness. Enlightenment is the awakening to the fact that you are whole. It's awakening to what already was. That's why it's an awakening and not an accomplishment or an acquisition. It is not an attaining. It is a realization. It's always been this way. I've always been this way, and I've always known it. Thump. Right? The dreamer simply disappears with the dream. And so in that you find, everything is whole. Just go to the sense of being all by itself. Look around. That sense of being that I point towards all the time, right? When you have right now, that sense of existence you have right now, which is undeniable. Does it feel incomplete or does it feel whole? Is it missing anything? Do you need something else to exist? No, it's total, it's complete. That's the realization. That it's a realization of that, right? So enlightenment is not an experience that you then get benefit from. It is a realization that everything has already been perfect, whole, all the time. Sean Latif says, all is. Love you, GP. Love you too, man. Jay, is choosing to place attention on awareness self-realization? Can we choose to not pay attention to thoughts all the time? What does Ajahn mean to inquire into these thoughts? Well, It's what I was just saying, actually. Inquiry or meditation. Meditation is you are you're recognizing that thoughts are there, but you're not engaging in them. That's what it means by not paying attention. It's choosing to place attention on awareness, self-realization. No, it is a path towards self-realization. Right? So it isn't. Oh, I'm focused. My attention is on awareness now. Therefore, I'm realized. No, it's not that. But you need to be looking in the right direction for the realization to take place. If I'm looking over here and stuff's going off over here, right? It's like I'll miss it. Right? So you want to look where it comes from, right? And it comes from the sense of being. That is because that's where the self is. The sense of being is the self. So the realization of the self by the self, it's not you as somebody realizing the self, it's the self realization. Self realization. It realizes it. You realize that you and that are one and the same. There's not two of you there. So, can we choose to not pay attention to thoughts all the time? Absolutely. But it's not really a choice. It's just when you begin to realize what thoughts actually are, when you understand what their place is, that oftentimes they're useless, right? So you can clearly discern. You are all the time not paying attention, but that means you're all the time discerning. Sometimes you have to pay attention to the thoughts. If you've got work that you're doing, right, important work that you're doing, you have to pay attention to it. But you can develop the maturity to be able to be aware of yourself even while your attention is on thoughts and the work and the stuff that you have to do. You don't have to have the attention divided, flipping back and forth. You realize you're always there. Right? That sense of existence is always there. In this moment, that sense of existence is filled up with all sorts of thoughts. The other moment, it's completely empty. It's the same, right? And you're aware of that, right? Right now, my sense of existence is filled up with a lot of thoughts. I'm processing this, right? I'm watching this. I'm watching my battery. I make sure I have enough time, which I do. I'm monitoring all the questions. I'm keeping track of stuff. So there's a lot going on. Have I lost track of my being? No. Matter of fact, were it not for my being, I couldn't do any of this. None of this could possibly happen, right? Also, realizing you're not the doer of it, you're simply watching it happen. Even, this is very subtle, but I think you can get it, Jay. Even, who is it that chooses whether or not to pay attention to thought? Isn't that just another thought appearing in front of that which is always present? So when Ajahn talks about inquiring into those thoughts, that's the inquiry, right? Oftentimes it's very useful, especially a thought about something existential, like, I am someone, right? I'm a spiritual person, or I'm not enough, or I am any thought about myself needs to be looked at. A thought like, okay, am I what I'm perceiving? Am I my thoughts? Is this thought really referring to me? There's an I thought that says I am this or that, right? And it speaks in the first person, comes into my head. If I don't know any better, I'm immediately going to think that I is referring to myself. But what happens if I stop? Like I just suggest, stop, inquire into that thought. Who's that I referring to? Right? Now that's a very powerful inquiry. You've stopped. You haven't robotically, unconsciously simply identified with that thought, taken it on as your own. Right? There's a separation between you and that thought of I, and you're going, is this really me? Or am I the one aware of that thought? That's an inquiry. That's following the thought. Is this thought really true? Where does it come from? Where's that I pointing at? Is this I pointing at infinite intelligence, or is it pointing at a limited sense of self? Oh, it's pointing at a limited sense of self. Well, that's clearly not true then. That's discernment. That's distinguishing. That's inquiring into the thought. It's not an analysis of the thought. Remember, it's always an inquiry from the point of view that I am awareness itself. My nature is consciousness. And I'm now inquiring into thoughts to ensure that I'm aligning myself with what I have discovered to be true of myself, however small that might be. It may be huge, it may be small, but I am now consciously aligning myself with that. The reality is that's not even happening by choice. That inkling of realization is aligning things for the you think you are. It is actually happening by what we call grace. Does that help you there, Jay? Inner aesthetics. Hi, GP. Do we need many of these being insights to chip away at our conditioning until we get to the I am? There's no maybe yes, maybe no. It's a great question. Chip away at our conditioning. We're not chipping away at our conditioning. The conditioning is the conditioning. The more identified we are with the conditioning, the more it's kept in place and won't change, right? So we're not chipping away at conditioning. Forget trying to change conditioning. That'll happen all by itself. We are disidentifying. We're recognizing that what I thought was me are actually robotic, repetitive patterns of thought, emotion, and sensation that were programmed into the nervous system. I mistook them for myself, and thus I self-limited myself by creating a sense of identity based on this very small set of conditions, that this is my world, this is who I am. Oh, I'm not. This was an artificial world created at a time when I was very young, and it's not who I am at all. Now, there's a habit of identification. There's a habit of constantly going back to it, right? That eventually we become more and more refined and nuanced, and we spot it right away and don't go there. But in the beginning, you'll find yourself being pulled into it. So it's not chipping away at the conditioning. You are disidentifying. Now, when you disidentify, there'll be a sense of a more consistent sense of peace. You won't be as reactive to the environment around you. You'll be more consistently content, right? You won't feel as grabby. And the end result is the conditioning itself will begin to change because it's been held in position by the sense of identity, which is the environment, an internal environment we created. It used to be conditioned by the external environment, but even though that external environment isn't there, you have replicated that through an internal environment, which has kept the conditioning in place. Disidentification frees the conditioning as well, and it will flow into more progressive, more useful, more resourceful channels, right? So that disidentification, the very act of realizing that you can disidentify and do it is in fact the I am. You're not going to get to the I am. You can't get to the I am. It's like me saying, I want you to get up right now and walk over to yourself. Right? You go, gee, I'm already here. Yes, you're already there. You are the I am. You don't get to it. It's a subtle thing that happens. It's a realization, not an attainment. You are realizing that this is what you've always been, but the habit pattern of identification has created this limited false sense of self that has felt separated, but in fact there's been no separation. The false self, the conditioning, and the sense of separation have all been being perceived by the I am. The seeker and the seeking have both been witnessed by the sought, because it's consciousness that's the only thing that's ever seen anything. So you don't get to pure awareness, right? You are pure awareness, right? You can't get to it, right? Only awareness can be aware of awareness, right? You can't have you and awareness. Well, then what are you, right? You are that awareness. You are the I am. Do you not, every moment of every day, feel I am? Everything does. There's not a sentient being on the planet that doesn't. Probably even this water bottle. I don't know, right? I can't tell, but everything that is a reflection of the I am. And so the one being reflects itself in the inner sense I am. That is the God that is immanent in all beings. But it is the I am that you are. It's all there actually is. It is the only consciousness. Does that work for you, inner aesthetics? God, I got a lot of questions today. I'm trying to get through them. Battery's good. Battery's good. They just flash on the phone where I'm doing this. So I have my iPad here to actually answer the questions, and I kind of plugs in the car. Thank goodness these cars come with a lot of plugs, but I don't have a second Apple jack for this guy. So, Amir says, "I am being, therefore I am." Yes, I am that I am. It really is a beautiful way to put it. Who are you? I am that I am. That I am I keep pointing you to. You are that I am. In Sanskrit, they make it even simpler. They just go Tatvatam. I am that. Hello, says Velmari. Hello, Velmari. My goodness, I got a lot of questions here. Let's see how far I can get. Rich H. Hello, GP. Rich here. It's been a year. Good to hear your voice. Good to have you back. Bertal, he abandoned his kid. Oh, already got that one. Of course, I was referring to God consciousness, not one in the sky. I knew that. I do feel the insight seeping its way in. Thank you, G. Great answer. Resonated with me. I'm feeling more love. So good sign. Yes, absolutely. Effie. Hi, Effie. Hi, GP. Effie from Istanbul. How can thought dominate our experience and cloud sensory perception so easily, although emptiness of it is seen from time to time? Thank you. Okay. I'm just kind of sitting here trying to get a read on your particular level of understanding, Effie. Look at it this way. Thought dominate our experience and cloud sensory perception so easily, although emptiness of it is seen from time to time. Thank you. All right. Put your attention on the one seeing rather than on what is seen for a moment. Because when you're referring to, you're saying, where did it go? Oh, all sorts of thoughts and things dominating the experience. And then sometimes you see the emptiness, right? The emptiness isn't what's being seen. The emptiness is what is doing the seeing. The perceiver is empty, not the perceived. And notice, whether the field in front of you is clear and spacious and empty and quiet, or it's cluttered and noisy and chaotic, the seer remains the same. The seeing is exactly the same. The seer is emptiness, not what's seen. You're thinking of yourself as you, and that emptiness is somehow an experience you're supposed to be. Emptiness is your nature. What it means is that your emptiness as your nature, what it means is that you have no inherent, concrete, unchanging attributes. If you did have anything that defined you solidly, you'd be stuck. You would be that and nothing else. Couldn't evolve, couldn't change, couldn't grow, couldn't develop, couldn't become awake, right? It is the fact that we are empty of these concrete, absolute characteristics, that we are formless, have no inherent characteristics, that is what makes us infinite, what makes us possible to infinitely grow, to constantly expand, and yet always remain timelessly the same. So emptiness is not an experience. Emptiness is what you are. And emptiness, look, space is not the least bit affected. As I'm moving my hand back and forth here, is space having to get out of the way? Is space being not there anymore because my hand is there instead? Right? So the emptiness is always there. Sometimes the emptiness is filled with all sorts of junk, like a room that's got all sorts of crap in it, right? And sometimes it's totally empty. It's the same room. It's the same space, right? So emptiness as a condition where things are just quiet and still and settled is that. It is a condition. It's a temporary thing. It'll come and go. And matter of fact, you couldn't have that emptiness without having its opposite of fullness, right? Right? You couldn't have the neatness without clutter, right? Because they come in pairs. They only define themselves. This emptiness does not have an opposite. It is simply what is, and therefore is not defined in terms of anything. Therefore, it does not have an opposite. So emptiness is what is doing the seeing. Matter of fact, you think of yourself as just seeing. Emptiness is seeing. It's not a thing. It is seeing itself. It's as if consciousness, formless consciousness, was just kind of wandering around the universe, right? Seeing, perceiving everything, but it had no form, right? It just is. This is the nature of consciousness. This is your nature. So the more you bring your attention back to yourself as the emptiness, instead of somebody trying to seek emptiness, and then being averse when things get a little bit cluttered or chaotic, right? Come back to this place from which both the calm and the clutter or the chaos are being witnessed, and see if that place isn't absolutely stable and steady and sound and light and full and easy, and not the least bit disturbed by all the activity going on. Got cars pulling out, got a little dust on my screen. Got the windows open, so otherwise it'll get too hot. Let's see if this too still bright. Oh, it's not as bright. I can let a little light in. Okay. Vilmari, I have a question. How do I get detached from my son, who I love with all my heart, but continues to hurt our family time and time again? Love. That's the simple answer. Love. Can you love him just as you are, right? To become detached doesn't mean you reject, doesn't mean also loving doesn't mean you totally accept them as they are. Sometimes you have to draw the line and say, this isn't acceptable, we can't allow this. And that's a loving thing to do. But then you have to let go of, you have to turn him over to love. This is a hard thing for parents. Give the child over to the divine. Look, the child came into your life. You didn't know who it was going to be. There was no plans. I'm going to have, my parents didn't set up and go, I think we're going to have, and describe me, right? In fact, they did describe somebody completely different, and we're terribly disappointed that this is what they got. But nobody has any idea. We also don't know what people are going through. We don't know what karma they came in with, you, and all the various things that make up their life. But if you can see that the same energy, the same voice that guides you to satsang, that guides you to meditation, to make this kind of inquiry, is also guiding him. And not judge where along that path he happens to be, or where he should be, or what he could be. Obviously, it breaks my heart when I see people suffering unnecessarily. That's why I do what I do. But I can't change their destiny. I cannot change, there's a wisdom greater than mine that knows exactly what somebody needs at exactly the right time to bring them that opportunity for awakening. And if they miss this one, what happens? Here's another one. If they miss this one, here's another one. And so on it goes, lifetime after lifetime, until finally, what's that? Foomp, they got him, right? And grace just starts drawing them in. There's that line from Rumi that I quote a lot. It says, "He who brought me here must bring me home." The one who brought your son to where he is must bring him home from there. And so you really can let him go in complete and utter love and confidence. It's not an abandonment. Don't let the ego tell you that it's your responsibility and therefore you're abandoning him. You should be able to take whatever he has. You're a spiritual guy. You should be able to just take whatever bullshit he's putting out, right? Wrong. That's ego, right? Just put that aside and say, I leave him in your hands. Father, what do you want me to do? Right? That's a very beautiful, heartfelt prayer, Rid me of ego and merge me with you, right? Let me always be wise. Just let wisdom flow through me. Wisdom and love, whatever form that love needs to take, even if it's a stick upside the head. And then do whatever is obviously right in this moment for you to do. And you will not go wrong. You can't. You cannot possibly go wrong. You cannot make a mistake. Okay, let's see here. Wow, it's after 3:09, after 3 already. Oh, that's right. I started late because I couldn't find a place to be, and I just pulled over by the dog park. Wow, so many questions today. Violet is missing her family. Let me just, yes. Give yourself permission, Violet, to miss them. Love them dearly, right? The missing is a sign of your love, right? If you didn't miss them, you wouldn't love them, right? Cherish them. Pray for them, right? Also remember, I realized early on, not really, or it took me a while, but it's one of the things that helped me become divorced when my kids were still young, is that I realized that they needed a good example of a strong father. They needed a good example of a loving home, and it wasn't one. And I also realized that even if I had to be without them, that the best thing I could do for them is to be awake and to stay awake. To be the highest example of truth that I possibly could be. The gift to your family, even beyond your presence, is your awakening. It's the waking of your heart to the universality of love, that everybody is embraced in that love, and they are never, ever outside of it for one moment. Use that. Use this opportunity, even though it's painful. Hey, Dale. Hey, Carrie. Carrie, still catching the last hour live. Yeah, it's still early in Australia. Um, I'm just, we're kind of running out of time here. And Osho once stated, we're all Buddhas pretending not to be. Yes, very true. Okay, let's see. Andrew is signing off because it's already midnight in Europe. Thanks for being present in adversity. You know what? I'm going to let it go for right now. Because I want to end on. I was going to talk about it at the beginning, but getting everything going so much. I mentioned it once briefly. These holidays that we celebrate. Holidays now mean days off and shopping in the West, but they actually mean holy days. Days for pondering something holy. It really should be every day. And the cross of the crucifixion is one of the central themes in all sorts of different cultures. Jesus himself talked about the cross long before the actual event. So it was a metaphor that he even used, not the torture device. It was actually referring to an ancient symbol of the quartering of the universe, the utter center being the intersection of the past and the future, the perfect absolute now, and the intersection vertically being heaven and earth, being the intersection that is the human being. And the crucifixion of the ego in the now, in the perfect middle way, is the birth of a Buddha. It is the resurrection of your true being. This is the actual resurrection, means the expanding of consciousness into its innate spiritual nature. The self-realization. That's the second birth, it's the second coming, it's the descent of the Holy Spirit, it's the day of Pentecost, a million different ways, terms that are used for it, but this is always what it means. It's referring to this. When I ask you to withdraw from the past, withdraw from the future, even withdraw from all the thoughts you have of you right now, I'm inviting you into a voluntary death. The real death. The death of our attachment to that which isn't real. To the appearances, mistaking the appearance for the genuine substance. So when we let go of the past, which is the only place the ego exists, and the future, and the only places where this false self can exist, we come into the center of the now. And in the now, there's no thought, there's no problems, there's no pain, there's no suffering, it's just, the only thing left in the now is being, just being. And when we come into this place in between our highest ambitions, symbolized by heaven, and our earthly instinctual existence, right, by the earth, we're right in the middle of just being, of the human, the animal instinct, and pure being, which is the manifestation. Right? This is what's represented by the cross. Your pure being manifest as a human. The ordinary human being is the Buddha. Those are Buddha's words. Right? this is what he was referring to. It's not an absolute state out there somewhere, nor is it just a mundane material state. It is a transcendent state that is both human and divine simultaneously. It is the intersection of the infinite past and the infinite future. This is the place that you occupy. And this is the place that is exploding in our world because it's exploding in consciousness. And this brings us to a really remarkable destiny that we all share. And I'm so glad, so overjoyed to be able to share it with you, to be on this journey with you. I just hope I last long enough to see it fulfill itself here. Better hurry up. So that's it for today, you guys. I will see you next week. From where? I do not know, but it'll be from somewhere. Till then, namaste.